Hello world, I'm Del Hussein and this is the Wow Mind. So Jim, I'm going to talk normal, right? And we'll get it going, and it'll all be edited anyway. But I am here with Jim Craig, Reverend Jim Craig, and it's my pleasure to be talking to you, Jim, because I met you, I think, about 2 years ago in the launch of the London Festival of Architecture, and that was phenomenal. You came in this big, you're huge, 6 foot,
about 6'4".
6'4".
Stand out a bit.
Green habit, red hair, and everyone, all the architects were looking around like, who is this guy? You know, so it was great. You were very mesmerizing, I think, is the word.
I do get, that kind of response wherever I go, for some reason.
But then I got talking to, because I couldn't quite work out whether actually you were a musician, and this was a stage look, or actually you're eccentric. And now I've found out subsequently you're probably both as well.
Yeah, I am, say that.
Yeah. But Jim, you were in the north of England originally, weren't you?
Yeah, I was ordained in Durham Cathedral in 2002. And really, I had been up north by then all my life. So being further up north kind of made sense, even though when I first arrived and I told them I was from Leeds, they all said, that's the south, as if to say I wasn't a true northerner. But I had a real heart for the northeast, for especially working class communities. And ended up being chaplain to the arts in Gateshead for 11 years, which was just amazing.
Did you always know that you wanted to go into the parish and become a preacher?
Not at all, no. Part of me is still just a little bit, dare I say it, surprised by it, if not freaked out by it. No, it wasn't on the cards at all. I hate rules, and I hate being told what to do, and I hate this word institution. Yeah. And we are a fairly big and long-standing institution with a lot of rules and a lot of guidelines. And I went to art college in 93 feeling, I suppose, a bit like an outdated punk, just wanting to, rip things apart. And then within a year, oddly enough, I became a Christian. Didn't want it, but also couldn't reject it because of I was just getting so many answers to my questions. And I was quite a miserable student, following a lifetime of eczema, and confidence was just nil, and just very, very anxious, despite having a big personality, which I kind of inculcated to get over shyness and get over that anxiety and pain. My university chaplain prayed with me, and I thought, sod it, I've tried drink, I've tried sort of mild drugs, and I've tried books, and I've tried intellectualizing the world and pain, and I'll let this weird guy put his, to say some prayers, and I felt something. You shouldn't always just go by feelings, but there was an intellectual side to the conversion as well, and that was just the beginning of, oh my goodness, there's stuff hidden behind, the veneer of life that you just do not give credence for until someone makes you stop and think and challenge your own prejudices. So I would have given...
How old were you at this point?
I was 20 when I went to uni, because one of the biggest themes in my life is failure. So I got 3 E's and a D for my A-levels, but I got into art college on the basis of my portfolio. Failed to get into any course following my foundation year in Leeds. So I had to take a year out, which is why I was older than the other students. And then, so arrived in Hull, age 20, nearly 21. And 3 years later, failed my art degree.
Right.
And eventually had to finish it whilst staying with some monks in Durham, which is another story.
Mate.
And they basically paid for me to go through the Open University and sort of, finally get my degree. So this theme of education and failure and confidence and people giving you second chances is so close to my heart, which is perhaps why I'm a university chaplain now.
Well, I mean, in that, it's a really interesting point you mentioned there, that you'd tried everything. You'd tried reading books, you'd tried, obviously, talking to friends, you'd tried, let's call it external influences.
Yes.
And nothing hit home. And then it was actually talking to this chaplain that gave you something. And how did that conversation go? What was it? What did you go and say? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people that feel like this,
I think for me it was a number of things. It was someone giving me a chance, and I looked weird, still do to a certain extent, but a lot of my fellow new Christian friends at the time looked like kind of fairly ordinary students. I wouldn't say they looked stereotypically Christian with, sandals, whatever, but I stood out, and they all gave me a chance and welcomed me. And the chaplain at the time gave me a chance and welcomed me. And also, he would take, his starting point was always where you were. So at the time, I was reading Nietzsche, Plato, just stuff that you knew through A-level art, and just studying that these were big influences, not just in the art world, but in philosophy and in life. And I thought, go on, I'm going to have some of that. Didn't understand an awful lot of it. Read Origin of Species, just thinking, surely this will help me kind of get to grips with what life is all about. And then for some odd reason, I started reading the Bible I was given when I was confirmed, and confirmation at that time was something my whole family went through. It was just kind of rite of passage. So I had this book on the shelf that I'd rarely read, and just picked it up, and over about 18 months, 2 years, read the whole thing, and it started to kind of connect with other bits of thought, and I was just reading it as a story, I suppose, which, to be honest, is the best way to read it. There's no pressure of interpretation or working out what you're meant to see in it. Just read it for yourself. And just at the time, I met David, who was so kind of down to earth that all his students called him the Rev. I was in the book of Job, which is really quite miserable. It's about suffering, and it's about God allowing Satan, who is officially in the Old Testament the accuser. We've given him the name Satan since, but really he's the accuser, and he's given free rein to punish Job, to test him, and it's kind of really annoying. Like how dare you do that? But it was interesting because Job gets covered in sores. I had a lot of eczema at the time, and there's an awful lot of Job holding God to account, desperate to see God face to face beyond, I suppose, the rules and regulations of religion. And he sees him face to face, but not in something pretty and wonderful and sort of like looking over nature and a panorama like Wordsworth and going, I saw him in a whirlwind, and a whirlwind blinds you. So there's something about seeing God in an inability to see beyond yourself. Yeah. And yet somehow that presents God to him. So I was reading through this and just going to the Rev and saying, what's this about? And I can't remember exactly what he said, but he wouldn't try and press anything on you. He would just say, have you thought of this? When I see you're troubled with that, so have you thought about it this way? And it was that mix of charisma, faith. I don't think I'd really met anyone of faith before who seemed to believe that God could be present with you or do something with you or heal you. And he was into praying for you and telling you that, the Holy Spirit wants to give you a blessing. Okay. So yeah, it was a mix of these things. Integrity, I think, is the biggest thing. The integrity. And having this sense of really believing really believing in this weird God thing, that there was some remnant of blessing that was still around now, and not just 2,000 years ago. It wasn't just history; it was somehow present history as well as the past.
So you're this young man, you're looking for meaning, you're looking for a direction, and you met somebody who had the empathy, gave you a shoulder, and started to open up in an area when you were already reading philosophy. And that gave you a direction that you could hold on to. So what did you take that direction? I mean, because one of the questions will be, and I think it's the question that a lot of people are asking themselves right now, is why? What is it all about? Why are we here? What is it all for? And I think particularly when you're a 20-something-year-old and your life's ahead of you, you are looking for that meaning. You're looking for that purpose. I think the older we get, we're still looking for it. It doesn't go away. But I think it's almost like through conditioning, you learn to blank it out a little bit until you get too old, and then you start crapping yourself. And a lot of people find some kind of faith late in life, almost as a result of, I've tried everything else, and I'm kind of, well, maybe this is the way, but you found it early.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the word early, because most of the people I was hanging out with at that time, and Christian Union, etc., seemed to have been Christians most of their lives. So I actually felt quite old at the time. And I almost felt embarrassed that I was old and coming to this quite late, which is interesting, isn't it? But I think I just found permission to be myself. Like a lot of people I've spoken to since, I have lovely, lovely parents, but they didn't really encourage me to, well, they didn't listen particularly well. And I mean, I'm hoping they don't listen to this, because I love them to bits. But I think, I'm one of 5 children, and I think I don't like to use the word suffer, but I think I suffered with a very small s through being the youngest for 6 years. Then my younger brother came along. My younger brother, very loud, very confident, and I think that just triggered a whole repeating pattern of how do I get my voice heard? And to get over that, I became loud. And somehow that loudness gave me the confidence to do all kinds of weird things, like, go to Rocky Horror Show, fully dressed up on my own, because no one else in my village wanted to go. And I think, how did I get the confidence to do that? But it just came because I was sick of being left out and not having opportunities to do stuff. But by the time I got to uni, I realised that it was all facade. I just had no inner confidence at all, but I could fake it really well.
But do you believe in that thing of fake it till you make it, where you say, this is how I'm going to be, I'm going to start behaving like that, and eventually it becomes natural?
I think that can trigger a burst of confidence that you need, but I think in the long term you need something else. I've done all kinds of big and brave things, which at the time just felt like, well, I have to do this for my job, don't I? I have to work out how to focus in a funeral and not get swept up with all the emotion, especially if it's a tragic funeral. And when I talk to people now, they go, I must take an awful lot of confidence. I think, well, you just kind of have to do it, really. And it helps the fact that we believe as priests, bishops, deacons, and all the way down to everyone who volunteers in the church. We all have a role, and God chooses you to do that role because he believes you can do it and you've got the skills. So it helps that you can recall the fact that not only have I been ordained and a bishop has laid hands on me and sort of prepared me for this role, but then to get through to the interview stage is quite rigorous. So a lot of people have found you worthy for this position and right for this position. And that the memory of that gives you confidence the first few years. But I found the last sort of 2 or 3 years, my sort of run of confidence has gone, or started to go, and I thought, well, what's gone wrong? I just naturally was just floating. Oh yeah, I can do that. I can strip off by the quayside and not worry too much about it.
I heard about
this. I can do this, I can do that. And suddenly, so yeah, it's interesting. I think you've got to dig deep, and I'm digging really deep now. And that's interesting that after 18 years of ministry, I'm coming to the end of that crest of natural confidence, and I'm really, really digging deep about, can I really do this?
What's challenging your faith in that case? Is it your faith that's being challenged, or is it your optimism? What is it?
It's optimism. It's confidence. It's perhaps even my right to see myself in this role. I don't think it's really a crisis of faith. It's just a crisis of confidence, and I think we all have support network in life that gives you the extra boost. For me, a huge part of that boost was having a supportive wife who was a Christian and who was very supportive of my ministry and was willing, to a large extent, to dedicate herself to bringing up with my two children and just being generally supportive at home and in church and understanding the motivations for ministry, because it can be a 24/7, 7 days a week role where you even when you're at home and there's nothing on, there's a potential of the phone ringing and you're suddenly needed to go and pray with someone. So you need someone who understands those pressures and can deal with those pressures. So I had a huge amount of confidence until 2.5 years ago, where almost out of the blue, she sat me down and said, "Look, I think I might be bisexual or perhaps gay," and it was just like, wow. And that was after nearly 19 years of marriage. And then that was kind of the beginning. I wouldn't say it was the beginning of the end of my confidence, but it's just started this cycle of, gosh, the marriage was totemic. It was such a confidence boost of thinking, I've had a difficult day, but there's the fact that somebody's there for you and loves you unconditionally is just massive. And yeah, I've had massive support from the church, from colleagues, and especially from this group called Straight Partners Anonymous. And one of the common denominators is that there is something in the person that suddenly, the gay spouse, in coming out, that almost breaks their personality, changes overnight. So now I've had this almost complete stranger to deal with through the divorce process.
This transformation.
But it was overnight. Overnight, it was suddenly zero affection. And so that just sent me to, a really dark place. A really dark place. I know I can do this, but can I? This constant self-doubt. And then because of the way I've been brought up, I have this instant reticence to ask for help. Because I think the response from my parents was often just, "Oh, there's other people in the world worse off from you," and just knuckle down, which is not brilliant, but it's not awful. They were doing their best with 5 children and busy life. So I just had to kind of steel myself to keep on asking for help and keep on just using every resource and not feeling ashamed.
Have you found, your faith has been something you have been heavily turning to for this? Because I guess when things like this, not necessarily the full extent of what you've gone through, but when people certainly go through divorce and they suddenly feel that loss, a lot of people, certainly friends I've had, they just go into kind of a depression, really, because they have nothing else that they believe in, and this was it, this person. Whereas I think for you, you've got this underlying something, this secret weapon. But I guess the point is, you still have a big loss. You have a big hole, but it's almost like, they say time heals. And I think in time, it I don't know if it heals or if you just get used to it, and you learn to adapt. How is that kind of along the lines of where you are now? Because that's now 2 years, is it?
It's 2.5 years since that conversation I mentioned.
Yeah.
2 years since I've been on my own with the children, 2 years last September. I think it's any crisis faces you a bit like the Book of Job. It faces you with your own prejudices, often towards yourself. So I'm wondering where my confidence has gone a lot of the time, and how this person who could just walk into a room with strangers now has to kind of steel himself to do that. I can still do it. I just have to kind of think, right, come on, God, give me that extra bit of which I had before, just to be the Jim I used to be. And I suppose the truth is, our sense of self is changing all the time. So it's taking the time to be compassionate with yourself, that you're not the same person now you were 5, 10, 18 years from when I was priested. And just, I think life is about a kind of old-fashioned adventure, really. You're kind of carving new territory, even when we persuade ourselves that, I've done this before, and this year is bound to be the same as last year. We're still kind of with those big kind of old-fashioned knives that used to get through the forest. You're still kind of, who am I today? And how weird things have become in the nearly 4.5 years I've been in London. So we've had, I'm not complaining, but it's always good. I'm a talker, so it's good for me to just process these things. So I've got 2 wonderful children who, my daughter was devastated at leaving her friends behind, of course, in Gateshead. Since then, my son has been diagnosed with high-functioning Asperger's, which kind of the diagnosis came to fruition through quite a lot of anxiety and a small amount of self-harm, which was quite alarming for parents. And then my daughter's going through similar diagnostic procedure at the minute. She's showing similar signs of some kind of ASD. She also was diagnosed with hearing impairment 3 years ago, so that kind of mingles with anxieties about socialising and making friends, but not being able to hear. And of course, she misses her mum hugely, and I think it's taken a full 2.5 years for me to learn not to be defensive when she shows these effects, these mannerisms, and all the anxieties that come across as being quite scary when you're a parent. As, gosh, my children are suffering and I can do nothing about it. Really.
Normally, people would turn to someone like you to talk about these things.
Yeah, exactly.
So you've probably been through this in Gateshead, I would imagine, which is the kind of like the harsh industrial north, where you've had, I would imagine, a lot of people with divorces, with children who are not altogether happy. And they just need advice. They need someone to give them a steer.
Yeah.
So what have you been turning for this? How have you been maintaining yourself? Because everyone is expecting, here comes Jim, giant Jim. You are the guy that people look at and turn to lift them. And then when all of a sudden you need lifting, where does the lifter go?
I process things much quicker through talk, so I've had to hand select some new friends to trust. And we've all got annoying friends who often come to us, and you want to avoid them because you know they're going to kind of just verbally assault you with stuff. Now, I've become that person, and I've tried very, very hard to kind of hold it back and not to bring it out in sort of meetings and things, not to be too indulgent. So I've chosen, a handful of, as I said, mostly new friends. And I've been incredibly blessed through, in 4 years, I've got to say, I've found London the hardest place I've ever been to make friends, because everyone is just super busy and everyone is just fighting their own private battles. But I'm lucky enough to have made several friends who who have been kind enough to kind of say, yeah, you know, I've only known you a year or so, but I'll take you out for a pint and have a chat. And interestingly, apart from the fact that there's a number of colleagues, fellow chaplains, etc., at King's who have been incredibly supportive, you know, they've just been very, very kind and, you know, persuading me, who likes to kind of work through issues by working hard, just to take time off and to go and collect my daughter from school and not feel bad about that and not feel bad about, you know, the demands of parenthood. So I've been incredibly blessed, but I've also been just a little bit disappointed about how much support has come from the place that employed me for so long, the diocese. So I'd say God always surprises you with who is there. It's not always the people you expect. It's not always the people you expect, but I certainly haven't been left without assistance. It's just, you know, when you look hard, friends come out of the woodwork and people you think are friends disappear, which is very, very sad.
So it's quite telling, actually, when you go through these traumas in life, that's the point that you realise this is what's real.
Yeah.
And this is who people are. And they're the people I can trust and rely on. And